It didn't happen overnight. There was no protest, no speech, no grand announcement, just a quiet decision, repeated by millions of men, to stop playing a rigged game. For decades, men were told what was expected of them. Work hard, provide, pursue, prove. They were taught that their value was something they earned through performance, through effort, sacrifice, and endurance. And for a while, it worked. Men chased love like it was a prize at the end of a long race. They built, they gave, they showed up, hoping that if they did enough, they'd be chosen. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The rules shifted, the gratitude vanished, and the effort stopped mattering. Men started realizing that no matter how much they gave, it was never enough. Affection turned into entitlement. Loyalty turned into leverage. And love, once mutual, became conditional. So they stopped running, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. The quiet exodus began. Men stepping back one by one, choosing solitude over chaos, peace over validation. It looked like apathy from the outside, but it wasn't. It was exhaustion, a deep soul-level fatigue from giving everything and still being told it wasn't enough. You can only bang your head against a wall for so long before you realize the wall was never going to move. So men started to walk away. Not loudly, not violently, but calmly. They stopped chasing relationships that drained them, stopped apologizing for wanting simplicity, stopped proving their worth to people who couldn't see it. And that silence, that calm, unbothered peace, is what terrifies the modern world. Because for the first time, men are finding happiness that doesn't depend on approval. They're finding peace that doesn't require permission. He's not angry. He's not bitter. He's just done performing. Now he wakes up early, not to impress anyone, but because he likes the quiet before the world starts talking. He hits the gym, not to be admired, but because it clears his mind. He builds, creates, travels, and reflects for himself. This is the silent rebellion, men rediscovering freedom in solitude. Not isolation, not avoidance, just stillness, a peace that modern love forgot how to offer. And deep down, it unsettles the world because peaceful men can't be controlled. They can't be manipulated through guilt or shame. They don't chase validation. They generate it. They don't need to prove they're good men. They just are. And in a culture built on noise and attention, a man who's content in silence is the most dangerous kind of man there is. When a man stops chasing, the silence he leaves behind is deafening. For years, validation was the heartbeat of modern romance. The glance, the text, the attention. It wasn't always about love. Sometimes it was about reassurance. Proof that she was still desired, still wanted, still chosen. But when men stopped playing the game, something inside the modern woman shifted. Not because she lost love, but because she lost leverage. See, validation isn't just about ego. It's about identity. From the time she's young, a woman is taught that her worth is reflected in how much attention she can attract. And for years, that system worked flawlessly. The world told her she could have it all. The power, the attention, the control. And men. They kept giving it. Endlessly. Willingly. Until they didn't. Now the compliments have slowed. The chasing has stopped. The constant reassurance she once took for granted has gone quiet. And that quiet isn't just silence. It's exposure. Because when the attention fades, the question underneath finally surfaces. Who am I when no one's watching? That's the ego wound. Not jealousy, not anger. Just the raw discomfort of realizing that external validation was never the same as internal peace. It's the shock of looking in the mirror and realizing that power built on attention was never real power. It was dependence dressed up as confidence. And the irony is, most men never stopped valuing women. They just stopped worshipping them. They stopped pouring energy into people who gave none back. They stopped being audience members in someone else's performance of self-worth. They stop mistaking availability for affection. Now, they're happy, quietly, peacefully, independently, and that more than anything feels like betrayal in a culture addicted to validation, because his peace breaks the illusion. It proves that the thing she thought gave her value, his attention, was never the source of it. He's not celebrating her downfall. He's not angry. He's just done performing. And that triggers something deeper than jealousy. It triggers realization. That love can't survive when it's built on ego. That attention is a drug. And withdrawal feels like rejection. But it's not rejection. It's revelation. Because when men stop giving validation freely, it forces everyone, men and women, to find meaning beyond being desired. That's the real wound. Not that men are happy alone, but that their happiness exposes how many people were never truly happy with themselves. Power in relationships was never just about control. It was about validation. For generations, women held a quiet kind of power. The power of being desired. The power to choose. The power to say yes or no, while men proved themselves worthy of the answer. It wasn't malicious. It was instinct. A system older than society itself. But when men started walking away from the game, when they stopped chasing, stopped pleading, stopped proving, the entire system began to glitch. Because suddenly the thing that gave her power, his pursuit, was gone. And what's left when the audience leaves the performance? Silence. That's the power shift. Not a war, not revenge. Just balance returning where manipulation once lived. For the first time in decades, men aren't begging for attention. They're redirecting it. Toward purpose, toward health, toward peace. And peace doesn't buy gifts. Peace doesn't chase drama. Peace doesn't play games. That's why it's so unsettling. Because a peaceful man can't be controlled. He's not reactive anymore. He's not competing for validation. He's not fighting for approval in a world that only loves him conditionally. And the more men find that kind of stillness, the more modern dating starts to crack. Because it was never built for balance. It was built on need, on insecurity disguised as power, on attention disguised as love. A man who's at peace doesn't serve that system. He dismantles it simply by existing. Because when he no longer needs her validation, he becomes something rare, sovereign. And sovereignty is magnetic. It draws respect, even from those who resent it. Because deep down, everyone craves that kind of self-possession, that quiet certainty that doesn't depend on anyone's opinion. This is why modern culture shames masculine independence. They call it fragile. They call it avoidant. But what they're really describing is freedom they can't control. A man at peace is no longer predictable. He doesn't chase what doesn't align. He doesn't argue to prove his worth. He doesn't play roles to be accepted. And when men start living that way, the balance shifts forever. Because now love has to be chosen, not coerced, reciprocated, not extracted. The performance dies. The manipulation loses value. And what remains is truth. Uncomfortable. Beautiful truth. That's the real power shift. Men realizing that their attention was the power all along. And by taking it back, they didn't become cold. They became whole. In today's world, reality doesn't live in the streets anymore. It lives on screens. It's filtered, edited, cropped, and shared, one highlight at a time. And in that digital theatre, everyone plays a role. For modern women, that role was scripted decades ago. Be desired. Be seen. Be validated. Not necessarily loved, just visible. Every post, every selfie, every caption, it's not just content, it's communication, it's a call for confirmation. Am I still enough? Do I still matter? Do they still want me? But when the men stop answering that call, when they stop liking, commenting, and chasing, the silence hits harder than any breakup. Because social media thrives on attention, and a man's attention is currency. Without it, the entire illusion loses value. That's why peaceful men, the ones who've walked away from the noise, seem to offend the algorithm itself. They're not angry. They're not bitter. They just stop participating. They don't need the dopamine hit of validation anymore. They don't need to project strength to prove worth. They're too busy living in reality to compete in fantasy. And that calm independence, it doesn't fit the narrative. Because if men can be happy alone, what happens to a system built on their pursuit? What happens when men stop feeding the machine? The answer is uncomfortable. It starts to collapse. The curated perfection loses its power when the audience stops believing in it, when the likes don't come, when the validation slows, when the mirror stops reflecting praise and starts reflecting truth. And that truth is this: men are no longer addicted to the illusion. They've traded scrolling for building, lust for purpose, approval for peace. And peace doesn't perform well online. It's not flashy. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't post its progress. That's what makes it so disruptive. Because peace can't be marketed. It can't be sold. And that means it can't be controlled. So when men choose stillness over status, it breaks something deeper than ego. It breaks the cultural script. Because for decades, the world told men they existed to pursue. Now they're showing they exist to be. And that shift is terrifying to anyone who's built their worth on being the object of someone else's chase. Because once the chase ends, the mirror gets quiet. And in that quiet, you can finally hear the truth. Peace is more powerful than validation. And once a man finds it, nothing, not attention, not temptation, not approval, can take it away again. Every system resists change, and nothing threatens the modern social order like men who no longer need it. Because for decades, control was subtle. It wasn't chains or commands, it was expectations. Be strong, but sensitive. Lead, but never dominate. Provide, but don't expect loyalty in return. Men were trained to obey the script, to keep proving, providing, and performing for a world that only gave conditional love in exchange. But when they stopped, when they chose silence over struggle, peace over participation, the backlash began. Suddenly, solitude became selfish, boundaries became toxic, independence became fear of intimacy. Every choice that made a man stronger, calmer, more centered was repackaged as a flaw to fix. 'Cause peace doesn't sell, contentment can't be marketed, and a man who doesn't need validation can't be manipulated by it. So the world did what it always does. It shamed him. It told him he was bitter, that he was broken, that real men don't walk away, that solitude isn't strength, it's cowardice. But he knows better, because he's been on both sides, the chaos of proving himself and the quiet of finding himself. And once you've tasted peace, you can't go back to performance. That's what society fears, men who no longer serve the machine. Because when men stop chasing approval, they stop consuming everything built around it. The attention economy, the dating market, the illusion of lack. They don't buy what they don't believe in anymore. They don't worship beauty that isn't matched with character. They don't fight for validation that feels empty when they win it. And the world panics. Because if men won't play, the game stops making sense. That's why every man who chooses peace is painted as the problem. Emotionally unavailable, fragile, afraid of strong women. But the truth is simpler. He's not afraid of women. He's just not afraid to be without them. He's learned that peace isn't loneliness, it's power. That solitude isn't punishment, it's clarity. And when men start living that truth collectively, the old order collapses. Because the entire system was built on his need to prove, to chase, to please. Take that away and the power structure falls with it. That's the real rebellion. Not anger, not avoidance, but indifference. The quiet, grounded kind that can't be swayed by shame or seduced by noise. The The world calls it arrogance, but men know the truth. It's freedom. Every collapse brings clarity. And for men, this moment, this quiet withdrawal from chaos, isn't the end of something. It's the beginning. Because after the noise fades, after the guilt and the shaming tactics lose their power, what's left is truth. And truth feels like peace. For the first time, men are beginning to see themselves clearly. Not as what they're told to be, but as what they are. Not walking wallets. Not emotional support systems. Not disposable protectors in a world that mocks protection. Just men. Simple, centered, grounded. They're learning that solitude isn't a void to escape, but a space to rebuild. A man alone long enough eventually meets himself, his ambition, his weakness, his quiet strength. He starts to remember who he was before the noise, before he was told to man up, before he was told to do better, before he was told that love had to be earned through exhaustion. He learns to sit with silence and finds that it's not emptiness, it's clarity. He starts to build again, not for approval, but for alignment. His work, his body, his purpose, all begin to sharpen into focus, and something powerful happens in that stillness. He stops running from himself, because the man who can stand alone is the man who will never kneel to false love again. He doesn't seek peace, he becomes it. He doesn't demand respect, it radiates from him. He doesn't chase validation, because everything he needs, he now carries quietly within himself. This is the awakening, the rebirth of masculine peace. Not angry, not loud, but anchored. It's not the rise of dominance, it's the return of balance. A man who knows his worth no longer fights to prove it. He no longer debates with people determined to misunderstand him. He no longer measures his masculinity in how much he can sacrifice for those who give nothing back. Instead, he invests in what gives life meaning, his purpose, his discipline, his growth. And when he builds from that place, love becomes optional, not essential, a choice, not a crutch. He can still love deeply, he can still give fully, but now he does it from abundance, not lack. That's the kind of man who changes everything. Because you can't manipulate a man who doesn't need you. You can only meet him as an equal. And maybe that's what the world needs now. Not men who chase, not women who compete, but two whole souls meeting where peace and respect live. That's the awakening, the return to truth. Not rebellion, not retreat, but renewal. For a long time, love was war. A constant tug of war between pride and need, ego and emotion. Men defended, women demanded, and both sides lost something sacred in the process, harmony. But balance was never about power. It was about polarity, the natural rhythm between masculine stillness and feminine flow, between strength and surrender, logic and intuition, giving and receiving. When one side tries to become both, the dance collapses. That's what happened to modern love. Everyone trying to lead, no one willing to feel. Yet now, in the quiet aftermath of the chaos, something is shifting again. Because men who walked away aren't just escaping, they're awakening. And in that awakening, a new kind of balance is being born. He no longer seeks a woman to complete him. He seeks one who complements him. Not a reflection of his pain, but a mirror for his peace. He doesn't chase love from emptiness. He invites it from abundance. And when it comes, he no longer loses himself in it. He stands beside it. That's what women will eventually understand. That his happiness alone was never rejection. It was evolution. It was him rediscovering what partnership was always meant to be. Two whole souls meeting out of choice, not dependency. Because love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's supposed to feel like stillness, like exhale after the storm, like two hearts that can rest in each other, not compete for air. When men heal their need to prove, and women heal their need to control, what remains is truth, the ancient balance returning. The masculine protects again, not through dominance, but through presence. The feminine softens again, not through weakness, but through trust. And together they stop performing and start being. That's what balance looks like. Not equality in effort, but equality in energy. Not sameness, but synergy. Because the truth is, men were never the enemy, and women were never the problem. They were just mirrors reflecting each other's wounds, generation after generation. Now the reflection is clearing, the noise is fading, and love, real love, is finally becoming possible again. Not the love built on fear, but the kind built on freedom. Not the love that needs to win, but the one that's already at peace. And maybe that's the quiet revolution no one expected. Not men against women, not women above men, but both finally remembering what it means to move in rhythm again. That's not weakness, that's balance. That's the return to truth.